Hey, Tim.
Hey, Carrie, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing quite well. So, what's going on? What are we talking about?
Hey, so I've been thinking a lot about logic and emotion this week and the difference in being logical and being ruled by your emotions or being emotional. And so I think it'd be a good idea to start with that.
Okay.
What do you think?
Well, I think anytime we talk about the subjects of logic and emotion, at first I think it makes perfect sense. And it's a really good idea. But then, I don't know, I get really sad.
So let's talk about this. So I want to talk about being logical versus being emotional, because I think that both of these things are decision-making tools that we can use in our lives to really move forward where we want to be. I will tell you that I have found, and I'm sure you've seen this too, is people usually gravitate towards one end of that spectrum or the other. They're either very logical or they're very emotional. But there's also a debate on the flip side of that about how you can leverage both of those things to really project yourself where you want to be. I think they both have their strengths. I think logic just, by default is really, it requires emotion to a point, but it can't be driven by emotion, right? You have to be rational. And does that make being emotional irrational? I don't think it does, but you tell me what you think.
Well, I think all decisions are made emotionally, 100%. 100% of all emotions that we ever make are made essentially from the autonomic nervous system's reaction to stimulus, to input that we get in any of the five senses, and we feel a certain way. I think oftentimes we will go back and rearrange that so that it seems very logical. I used to have this conversation with friends way back in the day, back when I was doing sales trainings, right? And we talk about how people always make decisions on an emotional basis. It's always an emotional decision that then they would support with logical rationale or justification, And so the decision to buy the sports car is a very emotional decision. The reasons for buying the sports car, all the things that you would tell your wife or your mother-in-law or your husband or your mother-in-law as to why you bought the sports car, right?
Your friend.
Well, your father-in-law doesn't care. He thinks it's awesome. Anyway, but the reasoning behind it would always be logic. It would come back to, it's a very safe vehicle and has excellent gas mileage. Superb decision, very carefully and well thought out. When the fact of the matter is, that's not how you made the decision at all. What you did was the cute sales lady drove up and parked outside the showroom with the film on the glass reflecting the cute little car that you then sat in, and then you looked up at the window on the showroom and literally saw yourself sitting in the car, and you thought, man, I look good. I feel good about myself in this car. You make the decision. Principally, you make the decision emotionally. I mean, if you really think about it, when was the last time you thought to yourself, logically and rationally speaking, what should I have for lunch today?
Never.
Most people would tell you absolutely never. You go to your friend and say, hey, what do you feel like for lunch? I feel like sushi. Really? I feel like pizza. And that's not to simplify it. I don't want to oversimplify it, but it literally is an emotional response, because the emotion is how we experience information being communicated to us through the autonomic nervous system that is constantly monitoring everything your body wants and needs and literally feels. And it tells you what it needs on a regular basis. And then it gives you a feeling. All of a sudden, everything smells like cinnamon rolls, or it smells like whatever you think you want for lunch.
So I think human beings by nature are rational, right? Like we try to make the right decisions for ourselves. I do think that that comes with maturity. I think that when we're younger, we're driven a lot more by emotion. I mean, think about kids when they don't get what they want or they drop their ice cream. Like, there's no logical thought process in the fact that their ice cream is on the ground. It's completely emotion. And so perhaps as we gain maturity in life, we become more logical. I personally am more emotional. And so that has left a lot of room for me to make decisions that logically may not have been the best for me, because I felt them. I wanted them. I wanted the new car that has really high, gas mileage, or I wanted I wanted to spend my rent money on beer because I wanted to go to the party and I was in college and I wasn't being rational. And we pay the price for that. And I do think that through that trial and error, we learn. But some people don't ever learn. And they constantly make they make their decisions on how they feel. They don't make a logical decision. Like, I don't go out on a date with somebody and sit there and go, on paper, he looks really good. Because if I do, then I'm never going to feel anything for him. It's just something where I'm checking a box. Whereas if I go out on a date with somebody and there's chemistry and I feel this connection, I might not make the best choice for myself, or I might be clouded. So your emotions can lie to you, but can logic lie to you? Yeah, your emotions can lie to you. I don't know if you know that, but they can. Big fat lies.
No, that's not what I was thinking. I was thinking, when you're saying I might not make the best decision, I'm like, what did you do?
Absolutely nothing.
Really? Like, what did you do? No, like, I think we're fundamentally, we're on the same page, but I think semantically we kind of disagree. We're talking about a little bit different things, right? Because I think that the only reason you think that you are making overtly emotional decisions is not that you are any more emotional than anyone else. It's just that you're not as good at lying to yourself about it. I think everybody makes emotional decisions about basically absolutely everything you do. There might be a logical decision here and there. If I say, hey, do you want a quarter or $1? You're like, well, I'll take the $1. That's a logical decision. Not a lot of emotion in that necessarily, right?
Sure.
But by and large, we're making emotional decisions based on how we feel and how we interpret a given situation, not with our cerebral cortex, not with our frontal lobe, right? We're thinking about it in our gut. We're thinking about it in our billion or so neurons that live in the gut biome. Now, these are the same neuroreceptors that tell us, before we can even realize that a stove is hot, it tells us, hey, you're about to touch something hot, and you withdraw, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember having an experience very much like this. I was out walking the dog one night several years back, and it's just me and Chesney, and we're tooling through. And, we were in St. George at the time, but there's this huge thunderstorm just brewing, just coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Dry air, big, huge clouds, a lot of friction. We're crossing the main street there, downtown St. George, when there's this enormous thunderclap that the lightning bolt was actually hidden from me. Number one, because it was just behind the building. Like other side of the building. Number two, it was so close that there was very little, if any, difference in time between the thunderbolt and the thunderclap. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's this incredible noise behind me, and I turn around to see what the noise was. And when I turn back around, I look down, and Chesney and I are both running full speed, Forrest Gump style. We were running. We were just gone. It was probably a 12-second 100. We were just gone. I look around. I think I'm still standing there until I turn back around and realize that I'm not still standing there. I'm running as fast as I can run to get away from this danger. Before I could even calculate exactly what was that noise? Where did it come from? What's going on? Am I in danger? My neurons in my stomach, in my small intestine, in my gut biome said, hey, there could be danger here. get out. And that's where at least 99% of our decisions come from.
Our gut.
Our gut, we feel a certain way. It tells us what to do. Now, that might not be the decision of, hey, should I buy this house or that house? Right? Sure. Something where you've got a lot of time to think about it. But even then, a lot of that comes from the neurons just in the gut. That's why we say, what does your gut tell you? That's where that turn of phrase even comes from. And so essentially, when you say I'm making maybe more emotional decisions than I feel like I should be, it's not that you're less logical or less rational than someone else. It's just that you're not as good at rationalizing your emotional decisions as someone else.
I think that makes sense. Yeah. I think it takes time, right? Like I purchased the car that I shouldn't have purchased when I was a kid because my first car was a Volkswagen Bug, 1973. I was so excited to have that car. Let me just tell you that it was not the best choice. I had to keep a accelerator cable in the glove box because at any time I could be driving down the freeway and the accelerator cable would break and the pedal would go to the floor and I'd have to coast off the freeway, get up under there and rewire that cable. I got pretty good at it. But when I was purchasing, I was good. When I purchased the vehicle, it was it was like, oh, it's a little love bug and it's green and I have green eyes and that'll be so cute and I'll be able to drive it around and it's, just adorable. And, I just think it's funny because there was nobody really there to say, Carrie, maybe that's not the best vehicle for you. And so now I look for something that is going to get me, it's going to get me where I need to be and it's going to be reliable. And I don't have anything in the glove box that I have to pull off the side of the freeway and change. As a matter of fact, I have roadside assistance. And that's just part of
being old.
That's part of the evolution. It is absolutely part of being old. Roadside. However, it's not AAA. I just want to point that out. But yeah, I think that I'm an emotional person and I enjoy being in the emotion. If you can make me feel something, you can win me over to just about anything. What you can't do is sit me down and create a logical debate to get me to make a decision. Right. Like I have to feel it. I can't just, and maybe, from what you're saying, it sounds like we all have to feel it.
That's absolutely everybody. That's everybody on the planet. If you're mentally healthy, that's everybody on the planet.
Okay. So let me ask you this. Why do women get such a bad rap for being emotional? Now, we can talk about the other side of that spectrum too with men, but I want to focus in on that because being a woman in business and just being a woman in general, if I react emotionally, I'm too emotional. If I show my emotions past a certain point, I'm unstable or I'm irrational. And so because I'm a woman, I'm automatically looked at as somebody who cannot be logical and who cannot make rational decisions. And I have to taper my responses in life and in the workplace, especially. I can't get heated about something. If I get too heated, I have to immediately come in and go, maybe I need to take a step back. Maybe I need to calm down and be methodical in the delivery of a message, or I have people that I lean on that I know that I can show that emotion to, when I can't potentially show that to the general audience. And okay, so talk to me about that, because that's a little pet peeve of mine.
First of all, you have to qualify the emotion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's one thing to say, if I get emotional, I am marginalized. Well, I can assure you that if a man gets emotional, he is also marginalized unless that emotion is aggressive or effectively patriarchal in nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unless he is the, big He-Man protector provider presiding over his domain. And that's the emotion that comes out. He's roaring like a lion. then all of a sudden, hey, well, he's awesome. He's a pretty cool guy, because we are fundamentally, there are these patriarchal drivers, and I don't want to like use all of these like catchwords or hot buttons or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact of the matter is that there's a lot of truth to it. We are essentially a warlike people. We are driven by the fight, the conquest. And, maybe one day in 1,000 years we get away from that, but that's where we are right now. And that's where we have been for time immemorial. Imagine that same lion of a man just,
yes.
Says, imagine that same dude is going, it's just not fair. And he begins sobbing at the boardroom table, right?
Right.
And it's like, I just, it's not fair that, and you hear that in my voice, even when I am doing a character,
mm-hmm.
even when I'm doing a character, I fall victim to it because I go out of my way to sound sort of effeminate. Right?
Yeah.
There is no manly way to cry, right? You swallow hard, one tear trickles down, and you can still be the president of the United States. But I'm telling you what, if you go one time,
yeah,
you're out, buddy.
Yeah.
You're out because you are no longer chief material. You are no longer the leader that we are seeking for the forthcoming war. And there's always a forthcoming war. It's a war in business. It's a war in life. It's a war in war. And that's really the difference.
I can see that.
So if we qualify the question a little bit better, we have to back up and say, okay, why is it that if a man shows an aggressive emotion, it's overlooked? It's accepted. He's patted on the back and said, I understand that he's just a manly man and he gets really frustrated and sometimes he just has to pound the desk. That's right. Mm-hmm. He's just a passionate guy who wants us to win and we should follow. But if a woman does that, then it's like, oh my gosh, can you believe that? We don't say that word. Mm-hmm. Don't even say it. Talk about not getting played on Facebook. But yeah.
No, I get it.
We're going to say, she can't understand normal thinking.
Right. But that's... I
Don't! For those who know, they know. They'll figure out what I just said. Let's leave it alone. Let's leave it alone moving forward. But that's the danger, right?
Right.
If she's aggressive, then it's not well received. And if she's emotional, if she's teary-eyed, she's crying, it's not well received, right? If he is aggressive, it is at least overlooked. Perhaps even well received, but certainly overlooked. But if he's teary-eyed, it's also not well received. And so it's the emotion. It's the emotion word. We got to think about what emotion we're really talking about.
Yeah. I will tell you that I'm a pretty strong woman, right? Like I'm successful and I'm pretty strong. And there are times where I will literally try to make myself smaller without intending to, and I have to catch myself. And so when I'm in a scenario where I worry that my directness or my forcefulness will be misconstrued as too masculine or too, in the way, I don't even know the word that I'm really looking for, but it's more along the lines of just
assertive.
Too assertive, yeah. If I'm too assertive, then it's going to be destructive in the relationship. And so and this is actually, I read a book on this not too long ago about building confidence in women. And women will actually attempt to make themselves smaller when they are in a mixed audience of men and women in the workplace or even after work. They will, we'll put our hair behind our ear, or we'll laugh a different way, or we'll bat our eyelashes, or we'll do something along those lines because we're overemphasizing our feminine nature. When in truth, I have the opportunity to run a team of 6 women, and these women are phenomenal. They show up, they drive hard, they make sure that they assess the goals, they get things done, they're doers, they're closers. And it's interesting to me because we all have bad days, and we have to go behind a door, wipe away the tears, fix our makeup, pinch our cheeks, and go right back out there. And does that take away from the logic versus emotion debate? I mean, isn't emotion a good thing? Isn't being emotional something that is positive?
Understand, I don't necessarily qualify it as positive or negative so much as it is the means by which your brain and your body communicate, right?
Mm-hmm.
We communicate hormonally, right? And you've probably heard that. Anytime anybody's emotional, oh, he, she is hormonal.
Mm-hmm.
They're just hormonal.
Absolutely.
Let it go. They're just hormonal.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and whether that is meant as a positive thing or an insult or whatever it's meant as, it is true when you talk about kind of how the brain works. You react by creating hormones in your brain, in your body, and those hormones escape into the blood system, and they go into the vast majority of active cells in your body that has the hormone receptor for the hormone that you are producing. So if you are alert and awake and alive, all of the cells in your body capable of receiving cortisol get cortisol from your adrenal gland. Your adrenal gland says, hey, let's wake up and be awake and alert and alive. Let's go. As a matter of fact, most people, their spike in cortisol for the entire 24-hour period comes within 3 to 5 minutes after they wake up. So you wake up for the day. And so you think it would be, driving to work and man, this jerk is riding my tail and I can't get the stoplight. I can't believe it. And you think that's when your cortisol levels would be peaking or at their highest, when you have the greatest level of stress. But it's actually not. It's actually not. It's actually just right after you wake up, your body's saying, hey, let's wake up and be alert and awake. It's taking you away from the other hormonal response that creates sleep, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so every decision you make is hormonal. Every decision you make is about how you feel. You can logically, rationally reason out your decision, but when it comes time to instruct your body what to do next, that's done through hormones. That's done through hormones both in the body and the brain.
So it's intuitive.
And the execution of every decision you ever make is hormonal.
That's interesting.
And when you say intuitive is, it's a really interesting word. Intuitive, by virtue of saying the words intuitive, when you say the word intuitive, what you're really talking about is the fact that you have an immense amount of information that's being processed by your 5 senses, at least the 5 senses we're aware of.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This immense amount of information is just churning through. Your brain is just chewing on all this information and doing the math, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so before the hair stands up on the back of your neck because you're in a dangerous situation, before your logical, rational mind has a chance to assess the danger, right? Like, who's that person ducking behind the dumpster? Like, I don't know what's going on. Is there somebody under my car? Like, what's going on here? Your body, through the use of your 5 senses, has already assimilated all of that information, and they've done the math, and they're warning you. I don't know what's wrong, but I know something's wrong, and the hair's up on the back of your neck.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yeah.
And in that sense, you are just a purely emotional creature. Think of like a cat or a dog, right? As soon as something freaks out that animal, they're not doing any logical reasoning. They're not looking around doing the math. The brain's already done the math. The body's already done the math. Most of it's already happened in the gut. and the hair's already up, right? The hair's already up on the back before they even know what's going on. And you are largely the same way.
Oh, I believe that.
You are making those decisions based on all of this massive amount of input that's coming into you. And we call that intuition. We call that, I just have a feeling that maybe this or that, just intuitively I know. But it's a little bit of a misnomer because you're not really knowing it intuitively. You're just amazingly good at your powers of perception.
In looking at emotions and logic, I find it interesting because I read a couple of things, just in preparation for this discussion. And I find it interesting that what I read was a concept that when we make emotional decisions, we make them rapidly. Whereas if we make logical decisions, we're a little slower in that decision-making process because we're weighing the pros and cons and we're looking at the big picture and we're trying to make a decision based on fact versus feeling. And
Okay.
I find that interesting because when we're making emotional decisions, it is a very rapid response. It enables us to actually make those gut decisions. And if we're really paying attention to our guts and our emotions, there are two things. We will make a decision for ourselves, and because we felt it, we won't necessarily feel as much regret or remorse for the decision that we make versus when we step back and we take the time and we weigh the pros and cons. I do this thing where anytime I struggle with making a decision, I always do heads or tails. I'll get a coin and I just say heads or tails. And I assign two choices to heads or tails. And it's interesting because if it lands on what I don't want it to, I feel it. And then I know what my choice is.
There you go.
You know what I mean?
All right, it was perfect. Yeah. Let me break that down for you. Unpack that a little bit.
Okay.
So, if you're flipping a coin to make the decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you pick up your coin and you go, okay, heads that do and tails that don't,
Mm-hmm.
right? Bam. Oh, heads. Well, I'm gonna go best 2 out of 3.
Yep.
Right.
Then you know.
You've already made a decision.
Yep.
And the magic there is, anybody who's out there saying, when you make an emotional decision, you make it really rapidly. And when you make a logical decision, you really take your time. Yeah, it's a crock. When you make a decision, you make it emotionally. And when you later go back and rationalize it with logic, it takes a little bit of time.
That's a great point. So really, we know. Because even in coaching,
we know immediately.
Yeah, even in coaching, right? Like if I sit down and I life coach somebody, all I'm doing is pulling the answers out of them, right?
Yep. They already know what they want to do.
Right.
They already know what their answers are. The answer to your question, the solution to your problem, is always that thing that you're pretending you don't know. People, for whatever reason, feel like they need permission to feel the way they feel. It's not enough. They don't trust themselves. And so they will come to you, they will come to me, and they will say, here's what I think, and I don't know what to do. And we'll say something like, well, if you could just do anything, what would you do? Oh, well, that's easy. I'd do this. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay.
Then there it is.
So then that's what you want to do. Now, let's figure out how to rationalize that decision to yourself and others so that you're comfortable with it. Most of what I do with people is we strategize for ways to explain your decision in logical terms to others who have a stake in the decision. Because we are, as human beings, part of the human condition is this desperate craving for a story. It's less important to know what someone did or the decision someone made than it is to know the underlying driver. I've got to know the story behind it.
Right.
Even if that person making the decision is me. And so I'm compelled to have a good story to tell people in terms of the decisions that I'm making, and everybody shares this. I worked with a guy who used to work for Reuters, the finance company. Mm-hmm. And he was telling me, he worked right on the news research desk. And he and a couple of other assistants that worked with him, their job was to describe to the world exactly why the markets were up or down that day. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So they would show up at the 6 o'clock news, and they would push the information across the desk to the news reporter to say, the Dow was down. The Dow was off 50 points a day because, and then here's why it was down. So here's what he would do. Here's what his day looked like every day. Him and his 2 assistants would get together, and they would rifle through hundreds of stories, 100 positive stories, 100 negative stories. And then they would wait for the market to close. And if the market closed up, they would go to the positive story pile and they would pick out 1, maybe 2 stories that would make it onto the news. And if the market closed down, they would go do the same thing. They would go pick up 1, maybe 2 negative stories. And that would make it onto the news. But the fact of the matter is, they had no idea why the market was up or down. It's chaos. It's random walk theory. We don't know why it's up, why it's down. But people have to know. My 401k is up 3 points this month. Why? My 401k is off 9 points this month. I've got to know why. Tell me. Darn that Brexit. Darn those Greeks. Those stupid Russians and their oil, right? People have to have a reason. And so all he would do is go out and find a plausible reason. When the fact of the matter is, we don't know the reason. And that's how the human condition is as well. We don't really know. We know what we want. And as long as we go with our gut on things, we tend to do really, really well in life. As long as we make the decision and we trust ourselves and then execute on the decision.
I agree with that.
It's when we make the decision and then we fail to trust ourselves, and so we half-heartedly execute the decision, then, surprise, the decision didn't work out as well as I thought it would. Yeah, because you weren't all in.
Right.
You didn't execute. And we didn't execute the decision simply because we did not trust the decision that we'd made, and we did not have a means of communicating the story to our proverbial mother-in-law. We couldn't tell our mother-in-law exactly why we did that. And so we just couldn't go all in on the decision.
So ultimately what we're saying is that we are all emotional human beings, and logic only comes in when we need to rationalize our choice. Because we can rationalize everything.
That is correct.
We can rationalize our bad choices. And so that's where logic comes in. So we're predominantly emotional, and we go with our gut. And we just need a story to validate why we are where we are.
That is correct. That is correct.
I believe that. I can get behind that.
Sometimes, many times, especially with the big things in life, we need an outside perspective to help us tell the world and ourselves that story. But the brain, the body, the experience, it will tell you the right decision. And then you'll immediately go, nuh-uh. Right? The minute you hear, man, what should I do? I think I should. No, though, that doesn't make sense. I got to think about that extensively. No, you don't. You really don't. But that's when you look to other people in your life who can look at it from a detached perspective, a third party sort of objective perspective. And all those people are doing is coming up with rational stories for you. They're just helping you find the rational story. Well, maybe it's this. I heard a really good representation of that just the other day when somebody said to me, the most sensitive nose in the world cannot tell the face that it's on if it has bad breath or not. Can't tell you. It just cannot tell you. Somebody else on the outside has to say, whoa, garlic last night? What's going on? You need a mint. Trust me. And it's not about our inability to perceive or our inability to understand. It's about our inability to understand ourselves, right? A knife can't cut itself. Fire doesn't burn itself.
Right.
And people can't understand themselves. They need perspective.
Well, I would venture to say that the more you focus on the story and less on the experience or less on the gut feeling, the more diluted you get from your actual goals and what you really want. Because I've seen people want something and want to achieve something, but then the more that they think about it and the more they try to find the story, they will literally talk themselves out of what they actually want. And it gets in their way. It gets in everybody's way. And I think that's where the accountability of an outside party also comes into play, because you're telling me what you want. And then you may have fear, you may have skepticism, you may feel anger, you may feel unworthy of this thing that you want in your life. And so you're slowly using that logic to talk yourself out of your gut reaction, your gut response or choice. And then you have someone coming in who is going to reel you back into that. And that's an internal fight that we all face. And it doesn't matter. It could be worthiness. It could be feeling like you don't deserve something, or feeling like you're not good enough to have it, or afraid of the change. I mean, we could talk about change all day long. I think we have before. If you're afraid to make that change, you can rationalize whatever choice you make to move forward with something, or to cease and go another direction.
Right. Heads again?
Yep.
Heads again? I'm going 3 out of 5.
Seriously, I'm not even kidding. It works. It works. I'll flip it, and if I'm like, heads, I'm going to make that phone call, and tails, I'm going to go to bed, and I make that, I hit heads, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to make that phone call. Let's try it again. I'm telling you, you have the answer. You know what you want. You have to remove the barriers.
You don't need to try again.
No.
Yeah.
Nope.
I get that. Sure.
It's not about fate. It's about really tuning in. And that's just my tool that I use to tune in, because sometimes my emotion gets the best of me. Do you know how often people will continue to look for the answer they feel like they deserve versus what they want? Oh, I don't deserve heads. I need to keep going until I get tails. See, I knew I was going to get tails. Yeah. I totally deserve it.
17 out of 36. Turns out I don't get to go. Yeah, we're crazy. But, I go back to that whole notion that, the fire can't burn itself. Fire doesn't burn up in a fire. It is a fire. And so it's really important to be able to have an outside perspective so that you can see what it is you really want. And then be able to tell yourself why you should or should not have that thing that you've decided upon.
Well, and I'll tell you, at the end of the day, people who are most successful, they follow their gut, they make a decision, and they move forward with it. I have referred to myself more than once as a lawn dart. When there's something that I identify that I want, I move forward with it, and I don't even think about where I'm going to land until I get there. And for better or worse, it's actually worked to my favor, because I've progressed. I've moved forward. Where if I sat back and I was gun shy and I thought, I should probably weigh the pros and cons in this and look at everybody else around me. And, are they better suited for the promotion? Are they more deserving of a relationship? Or are they cuter than me? Or are they smarter than me? Or whatever. And the truth is if I'm at that starting point and I'm going to catapult myself forward, I'm going to win every time, because chances are everybody I'm competing against is sitting back there going, well, do I deserve it? You worry about where you're going to land when you get there. I mean, within reason. Let's not go crazy, but you don't take the time to tell yourself the story. If you go with your gut and you know what you want, then you move forward with it. You don't stop. If it works out poorly, it's experience. If it works out well, it's success.
Yeah, there's no way to lose. All right, anyway, I think we're done.
Well, I'm glad we're back. I mean, we had quite the little hiatus, but it's going to be good. It's going to be a good time.
I agree.
I feel it in my gut.
That was as bad as the joke I opened with, so we're going to end on that. That's it. All right. Well, Help me remember that catch line again.
Oh, I think it's live your life. No. Live your life and dream your life. Oh, I've got it. Dream your life
and live your dreams.
All right. See y'all next week.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.